Welcome to Fantastic Math. This is Mr. V, and in this video we will factorize a quadratic expression by completing the square. So we've already looked at a couple of these before. The main difference is we now have this minus in front of the bx term. That's going to result in us using the slightly modified version of the perfect square rule, where we have this minus in the bracket. But it turns out the rest of the method is still relatively unchanged. So first up, we're starting with x squared minus 6x minus 5. And we're going to focus on the number in front of the x. And we're going to halve that. So the half of 6 is 3. So our key number now is 3. What we're going to do is we're going to add and subtract that term. So x squared minus 6x. And we're going to add 3 squared, and we're going to take away 3 squared. And of course, together, they cancel out and make no difference at all. But the trick helps us solve the equation. So that was step 2. So now we're going to look at the first half, and we're going to simplify that using the rule. So x squared minus 6x plus 3 squared is simplifying to x minus 3 all squared, that perfect square. And then we just got to simplify the leftover part, the rest. So 3 squared is 9, and minus 9 minus 5, minus 9 minus 5, that's minus 14. So we now have minus 14 in our equation. That's the bit that fixes up the square. And that's it. That's really the difference. We just have this minus in the bracket. Now the second example is a little bit more complicated, but it uses the same principles. So we have x squared minus 7x plus 10. And you'll notice we're going to be doing the same thing, but we now have this uneven number in front of the x, which makes things a little bit more ugly, I suppose. So first up, we want half of 7, and that's the awkward part. There is no whole number that's half of 7. So we could use a calculator, but just for the sake of keeping things as accurate as possible, let's not. We'll use the fraction. So here's the ugly part. This is going to turn into x squared minus 7x. And then we're going to have plus 7 over 2 squared minus 7 over 2 squared. And then we still had our plus 10. You see why this is more ugly? We have a fraction. Fractions are not fun. We can now simplify the front of the equation. That becomes x minus 7 over 2 squared. And then we need to figure out this bracket, this fraction squared here, because we need to be able to simplify this. So minus 7 squared is 14.9 divided by 2 squared is 4 plus 10. And of course, I can rewrite 10. I can rewrite 10 as 40 over 4. If I do that, then I can actually add these as a fraction. So this simplifies even more to x minus 7 over 2 squared. And then we have minus 49 plus 40. 49 plus 40 is 89 over 4. And of course, if you wanted to go a step further, we can make that a mixed fraction. 89 over 4, we can pull exactly 22 out of that and be left with 1/4. You don't have to do that. And yeah, it's certainly a bit uglier because we have these these fractions that we're dealing with, but the math doesn't change, which is nice to know. And that's how we can solve some slightly more complicated quadratic expressions using completing the square. Fantastic.